Hi, welcome to Chris 180's Candid Conversations series. I'm Chandra Leckett, Chief Marketing Officer, and today we are talking about Women's History Month, but not just the commemoration. We're talking about relationships, friendships, and what are the things that we need to do to bridge the gap, to build stronger, healthier relationships. Our experts are here today to give us some tips and suggestions on how we can keep the bond really tight with the people who mean the most to us. Ladies, take it away.
Hello, my name is Adrienne Marshall. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, and my current role here at Chris 180 is training specialist. I have been in the mental health field for 10 years and have been a practicing therapist for 7.
Hello, my name is M.Ed Puckett. I am also a therapist, a licensed associate professional counselor, as well as an operations manager for our Fulton County offices at Chris 180. I have been in the field since 2020 and soon will be applying for licensure.
Okay. Yes, definitely. Well, Emily, I'm so excited today to be talking about relationships, especially for women during Women's History Month. And it is just amazing to think about how healthy relationships have helped us to accomplish such positive change within our personal lives and throughout history.
Definitely, I agree, Adrienne. This is such an important conversation, and I think it is something that can be transcended for all ages for women. It's something that we're always trying to look internally and determine, and also look in the past and determine how has this been shown and what can we take from the past and take into our future just to have these healthy relationships.
Right. And when we think about what healthy relationships have allowed us to accomplish so much from the civil rights movement, the women's suffrage movement, even in terms of reproductive rights and rights in the workplace, so many of our relationships with other women and within our careers and even our romantic relationships helps to really push us forward in a positive way. It gives us the support that we need to move further and to accomplish more and do what we need to do as women.
Definitely, I agree. I think it is important for us to recognize that these relationships, they aren't limited just romantic relationships, right? It is the workforce, right? It is friendships. It is wherever we need to be propelled forward, right? The goals we want to meet, right? Relationships are how we get there, right? If we take that out, are we really going to be able to meet our goals effectively?
Right. And when we think about some of the difficulties that we oftentimes have in life, or the difficulties that we face over history, over the time of history, we can also really think about relationships as coping skills and emotional support, right? We all need a village of support. We need a web of support. And I think it's important to think about healthy relationships in that way and how they've offered us not only encouragement, emotional support, right? A shoulder to lean on, a shoulder to cry on when we've really needed it. So thinking about it in terms of that form of support is also a must-have in our lives as women.
Definitely. I think for women specifically, we really do lean on our social network, no matter if that is family, friends, mentors, people in the community, right? That is where we find our strength to continue to push on, right? So I think back to the women in the past, right? And thinking about how they probably relied on the connections they had to help them achieve the change they did, right? Because that's what helps propel us forward and to help us to continue to push on, right? To know that we've got these people who have our back and they're here to support us.
Right. And that support even contributes to healing trauma, right? So even though, a friend might not be a therapist's office, right? It helps us to process things that we've been through, when we call up that friend and we can just vent and we can just kind of lay things out there in a very safe space. That also helps, those things in our brain to get to working, and really think about how can we turn a bad situation into a positive, or how can we look at things and reframe them in a different way so that we can move forward past maybe some struggles that we've been through.
Definitely. Yeah, I think that being able to connect with someone who, even if they haven't walked that path that we have, right, that they know that, right, I have that perspective, right? And I can share that with you.
Right.
And that can help be such a healing piece, right? You don't, like I said, you don't have to walk exactly what I have. We've all shared trauma in our own sense.
Mhm.
And that's where healing begins. So I
Right.
definitely love that. I think that something we also want to talk about is talking about boundaries that
Exactly.
comes with it, right?
Mhm.
So having healthy relationships, but how do we get there, right?
Right. How do we get there?
How do we get there? How do we maybe maintain relationships we already have? But those boundaries are so important.
Right.
So what comes to you? What comes to mind for you when you think about boundary setting?
Oh gosh, boundary setting. Boundary setting is something that we don't always just love to do, right? But it's so necessary because it just helps us to build resiliency. It helps us to notice maybe some unhealthy relationship patterns that we may have had in our lives or within our families' lives, and use that as a means to want to do better and improve, right?
Definitely. And I love what you brought up about the family, right? Because that's generational, right? So I think recognizing when we are kind of on this road to figuring out, like, do we have healthy relationships?
Right.
And if not, right, what do we need to do? A lot of times we look to the past, right? We mentioned before, and look into that family, right? And sometimes we have maybe some unhealthy generational patterns that when we have the awareness to kind of maybe have some insight into that, then it really helps to shine a light on, okay, we're not here just to continue these patterns, right? We're here to break this. And I think that's very common, especially in this generation right now, is, hey, I recognize this. Now what am I going to do to make sure this doesn't continue?
Right. And I think the benefit of it is that it helps us to build resiliency and a sense of self-worth, knowing that we can have those boundaries and we can have great relationships, meaning that we are worthy of respect, we're worthy of love, we're worthy of acceptance. And boundaries, surprisingly enough, helps us to accomplish those things.
Yeah, definitely. And I love that you named a couple of those things that are super needed in these healthy relationships, right? And I think that's also so very important for women to be able to, when you take a step back, you have that insight, recognize what hasn't been here, right? Or maybe I have this in one of my friendships, but how do I make this a continuous thing, right? And recognizing what do I need from others, but also what can I give others?
Exactly. And just using that as an opportunity to maintain healthy relationships and healthy connections, right? And kind of weeding out maybe those connections that aren't so healthy for us.
Definitely. Yeah, I think it's like you said earlier, no one likes doing this,
no,
right?
But
I think it's important that we recognize the impact it's having on us, right? And also the impact it's having on others, right? So I think it is something that is super imperative, super important, and something that, going back to what we said about you have these relationships, right? Maintaining them and using them as a source of strength to maybe continue to do the hard work and maintaining these boundaries, right? You have it there for a reason, so use those relationships.
Right, and we all have a need for connection, but we do have to take a moment and make sure that we're making healthy connections.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that.
I have a question, ladies. So can you give us an example of what setting a strong boundary in a friendship would look like?
I'll speak on that. So I think that an example of setting a strong boundary would be finding ways to say that you're not comfortable with something or to say no, right? A lot of people have a very uncomfortable relationship with the word no, believe it or not, and finding ways to say no and just standing firm on that when you feel like you're getting uncomfortable and it's crossing a boundary for you.
Yeah, and just to add to that real quick, knowing that saying no, there should be a period after that.
Right.
It doesn't need a comma and this, right? Like you don't have to explain that, right? But just being able to be comfortable with, no, I can't do that, right? And you don't have to explain. It should be okay. But unfortunately, we're kind of in a society where that's not always the case. But yes, I totally agree. Is some people have such a hard time saying no, and that can be such a boundary crossing, and you can just be very worn out at the end of it.
The benefit of seeing a Chris 180 therapist is that they can teach you how to create those boundaries and find ways to say no.
Yeah.
And figure out what is uncomfortable about this for me. What is it that I struggle with, in a very safe and non-judgmental space.
Yeah, and I love that. Also, kind of part of what we do here at Chris is we help model what a healthy relationship looks like.
Yes.
We model what a healthy therapeutic relationship looks like.
Exactly.
Right? And that can just be the avenue to have these conversations and to recognize, okay, all right, I know what this relationship should look like, right? The do's and the don'ts. But also, how does that look like romantically? How does that look like with coworkers or your boss? And so I think it's just a great avenue to kind of establish that.
Yes, indeed. And as well as with different avenues in life to create a village, to create a support system, you have churches, you have the gym, you do have your workspaces, you have, families, whether you have big families or small families, social media groups that you can find, community groups to help create that supportive group and village for you.
Yeah, and I definitely think that ultimately the theme of this conversation that I hope people take with them is recognizing that the more insight you have, the more that can strengthen you to establish and or maintain these healthy relationships, right? And it all comes from inside. You can't do anything if you don't have it. But once you do have it, what are you going to do with it now?
And just remember that it is a learning process. This is not something that you innately know how to do. It's a learning process. It's a learning curve. It's a growth curve, and we all go through that. And so that's important to remember as well as we're learning how to create healthy relationships.
So I would love for you two to speak about how do you build a community? So you've talked about your circle and the people that you were in relationship with, but for those who may have been isolated during the pandemic and not really fully brushed up on their social skills right now, how do you go about making those relationships?
Yeah, I definitely feel like I personally am in this environment where it's like you get to an age where you're like, oh, where are my people? Right. It becomes work. Right. It becomes like, your kids' PTO or just things that you have to do, right?
Right.
So I think it is kind of tricky when you enter different phases of life. But I think, again, going back to that insight, recognizing that, but also pushing yourself, right? To get out of your comfort zone. Recognize what are your interests, right? We are not just like family and work, right? Like we are people too, and we have interests that is unique to us. And so I think recognizing what that is and stepping out of your comfort zone if you're not already doing that, and really just striking up those conversations and being okay to be like, hey, like you have a relationship forming, right? Similar interests.
Right.
Invite them to coffee or something, right? And to then nurture that relationship.
Right. And, taking small steps, making sure that when you are creating relationships that you're doing so organically, right? Starting up small conversations. Small conversations can lead to big conversations. This is not to say that you have to jump into every community group or, activity group at your child's school or what have you that you see. But finding, like you said, Emily, one thing that you're interested in, right? And maybe going to some meetings or finding out a little bit more about, those activities and those groups. And just, again, taking small steps and using that as an organic process to build on relationships and grow that support.
Definitely. I agree. And establishing a genuine interest.
Exactly.
That goes a very long way, right?
Right.
To really get someone to talk and to want to also come out of their comfort zone, show genuine interest. And that relationship will continue, like you said, organically to form.
Right.
So our closing question to you. So we've talked a little bit about finding your circle and setting boundaries. But as we know, this is Women's History Month, and often women can grow apart due to various life circumstances, and it's often hard to keep up a relationship when you're in different phases of your life, and that could look like anything from motherhood to intense workload. What advice would you give to women who are trying to stay connected?
I would say that remember that everybody is in need of encouragement and support, right? So it's important to remember that, again, with balance and boundaries, to be willing to give out that which you also need to receive, right? So picking up the phone and checking in with a friend, it doesn't have to be a long conversation, just saying, hey, I just wanted to see how it's going. I remember, maybe your son was starting kindergarten. How did that go? Just checking in and maintaining those types of connections that way. Check-ins are a great way to do that.
Yeah, check-ins are wonderful. And I think anytime you feel that, that person's on your heart and you need to reach out, or anytime like they pop into your brain,
right?
You can't do it in that moment, right? Make a note to do it later and to not just push that to the side, right? Because it came to your conscious for a reason. So use that, reach out to them, and like you said, whatever you feel like you're needing from others, right? You got to take that step as well. It's a two-way street, and then it'll, like you said, organically thrive again.
Right, and make certain outings, a priority. We get so combined, so bogged down with family life, raising our kids, whatever that we have going on. It's okay to take one day out of the month or even a weekend out of the year to reconnect with people who remind us that it's okay to be ourselves and not necessarily always in mommy mode or work mode. Or,
wear a different hat for a day.
Yes.
You are more than just who you are at work or who you are to your family.
Yes, exactly.
I love that.
Yes.
Well, thank you, ladies, so much for the really insightful conversation. So I think what I took away is set boundaries, be yourself, be intentional, and build real connection in relationships. And that's the real key to life, right? And so this message isn't just for women or those who identify as women. We're talking about relationships across the spectrum. So we hope that you will share this message that you heard here with a few of your other friends. You can share it on social media. You can send it as a link to them as well. And you can also check out Chris 180's YouTube page. That's where we have more Women's History Month content. We would love for you to take a look at it. And if you need therapy or counseling or someone to talk to about your relationship issues, Chris 180 is here for you. All you have to do is go to our website, chris180.org, to schedule an appointment. Thanks so much and have a good night.